When you don't have time for all those facts, when you don't have an hour free and need to be informed, take a listen to today's Morning Moment, coming up right now.
You're listening to A Radio.
Landing ground.
Thank you for joining us. You're listening to A Radio, and this is the Morning Moment. We are on Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 11:45 Eastern. Follow us on Spreaker.com and click on the like button. You can find us on most social media platforms such as iTunes, Spotify and iHeartRadio. Go to our website, aradio.wordpress.com, for details, where you'll find more content and details on our podcasts and more. This podcast, I think, is probably one of the most important ones I've ever done. We're going to introduce you to two words that most of you have never heard before in connection with an election. I hope what I'm about to impart to you, for those of you who haven't heard it, will, I hope, shock, disturb, and find deeply shocking, if not disturbing. What I'm about to tell you has worked in the past, but not in the United States, in other countries. Countries that the US State Department wanted to influence. This is not science fiction. It's science fact. To be completely accurate, it's computer science fact. If, like me, you watched on the evening of November 3, election night, when the results started coming in, it looked pretty good initially, and then you had a feeling. Something didn't make sense, did it? Didn't quite add up, didn't feel right. Remember that 96-mile Trump convoy of cars? No way could that not be reflected in the feeling that the country had. And then you saw fake election calling by all the networks, including Fox. They called some states hours too early, particularly on the West Coast when they actually were still voting, while waiting hours to call others, like Florida, when everybody knew that the panhandle was all that was left, and that was solidly Trump territory, Republican territory. But yet they refused to call it. And then finally, you saw one vote count after another mysteriously halted with no meaningful explanation. You all remember that? Weren't you as puzzled as I? I'm sure there were experts at the time who told us it's just a minor issue. They would continue shortly, but they didn't, did they? And then you started to hear stories of strange goings on at counting stations all over key swing states, and who knows where else. And then mysteriously, what was once a large lead for the Republicans and the president seemed to sort of melt away. Just enough to put those states in doubt. And then more votes turned up, and hey presto, Biden was winning. It didn't make sense when Republicans knew their turnout was bigger than it's ever been. Now, in my world, 2 + 2 = 4, but not in this one. And yet, here we are, where Biden and the media have claimed victory. But wait, there's more. I want to tell you a story. Well, I don't. I'm going to play you a few clips. There were going to be 2, but I think there's a few more than that. Because maybe they can explain it better than I can. What you will hear is science, but it's not science fiction. First, you're going to hear from Steve Bannon on his show War Room and Pandemic. He's talking to General McInerney. He explains exactly what Hammer and Scorecard are and what they've already achieved. What I want to impress on you is all that is said here is prior to the election day. This is not 2020 hindsight stuff. It happened before November 3rd. Here's that clip.
General McInerney, thank you for joining us on War and Pandemic. You've got some breaking news we got to talk about. It's one of the reasons we have Sidney Powell over here today. Something very disturbing. There's been a site called the American Report. It's got a woman named Mary Fanning's done some incredible reporting, particularly about a guy named Dennis Montgomery. What is it, this thing that's going around about this project or this system called Hammer? Explain to our audience what this is and why it should be of such concern to people in this current situation that we're in.
Yes, I will, Steve. The fact is that Hammer is what we call a SIGINT, a signals intelligence program that the NSA came up with years ago. The CIA picked it up under the Obama administration, and I broke it in March of 2017 about what they were doing on the Russian hoax. But the fact is, the Obama administration took this system and they put in an application in this SIGINT program called Scorecard. And Scorecard changes votes at a certain point in the voting stream. And if I can, and by the way, the Obama administration used it in the 2012 election in Florida. And so both Obama and Biden are very familiar with this. Now, I've got to make a quote here.
Yeah.
And it's important that we all understand it. It's by Joseph Stalin. I consider it completely unimportant who in the party will vote or how. But what is extraordinarily important is this: who will count the votes? Now, Steve, we have a desperate Democratic Party that will do anything to bring the country to a totalitarian state and as far left as they want. They used it in the primaries, and Bernie lost to Biden because they used it in the primaries. So it is ready to go. I just found out about this yesterday. Sidney has played a very important role in assisting me and Mary Fanning and Alan Jones in trying to get the word out so the American people know all this enthusiasm you're talking about in Pennsylvania gets changed very quickly with this software program that switches 3% of the votes. That's
okay. Hang over a second. Hang over a second. General McInerney, I want you to give just quickly your bona fides. Talk just briefly. Give me a minute for the audience on your career.
Okay, 35 years in the Air Force. I ended up the number 3 man in the Air Force in the headquarters. I had 4 tours in Vietnam. I commanded the raid on Tripoli in 1986. We attacked Tripoli from my headquarters in England. I was then the Vice Commander-in-Chief of U.S. Air Forces Europe, and then the Commander of Alaskan Command and Alaska NORAD region. So I had a very extensive operational career, and I'm in the cloud business now, and that's why I'm so intimately familiar with what Hammer and Scorecard can do, and nobody knows it. Nobody knows.
Okay, now also, you're one of the most revered officers in the U.S. Air Force, an unbelievable career. I want to go to Hammer. Hammer was the single most important and the single most sophisticated, basically, system that came up after 9/11 for really intelligence or counterintelligence about radical Islamic Jihad and the ability to monitor that. Is that how the beginning of this started? Was a foreign surveillance system that allowed the national security and intelligence apparatus to watch our enemies. Is that how this thing started?
That's how it started, Steve. Very sophisticated, very, very capable. And the fact is, it was then adopted with the software packages like on your iPhone to the voting business. and it was to be used, and it was used in foreign countries. And so it was then moved over into the CIA, and they started looking at U.S. citizens. That is illegal. The CIA cannot look at U.S. citizens, and only the FBI with the proper FISA warrants, etc. Sydney knows all about this. You know all about this. And it is extremely important that this was taken out of the CIA when the Obama administration left. They used some kabuki to get it out. They still have it up and running. We know where it is located. We know it's active tonight. It's active. They've been looking at a whole host of things, as has the DNC, using false IPs. And they are looking around, and they are trying to set up this voting thing that happens on Tuesday night. It's going to look good for President Trump, but they're going to change it. And that's the danger that America and everybody must realize.
I just want to mention, we got about 2 minutes here. In the next segment, Sydney and I are going to drill down on this a little bit more, and we're going to talk about some polling other things, but hopefully get you back before the end. Dennis Montgomery. The last time the audience heard about Dennis Montgomery, he was being rounded up at his house. He had 47 hard drives, I think he had taken from Fort Meade. How does Dennis Montgomery fit into this story?
He's a genius, and he loves America. Dennis invented him. Dennis invented Scorecard. He's the programmer that made all this happen, and he's on our side at great personal risk, as well as he hasn't benefited financially from it. He is an absolute genius, and so he's extremely important to what's going on. It would have happened in 2016, Steve, except something happened to it that night when the Obama crowd and the Democrats tried to use it. I can't talk about that.
Dennis Montgomery is like the character Nash in Beautiful Mind. I mean, this is one of the smartest programmers ever. He wrote this incredibly sophisticated program. And that's why this event in August of 2015, when he was basically gathered up and he had the 47 hard drives. Heck, we got one hard drive from Hunter, and we're still going through information. He did this, as we now know, he did this to essentially save his country and expose what's going on. What was he trying to expose, and what should the American people know today on the eve of this election that 250 flag officers sent a letter to President Trump, said it's the most important, including my old boss, Tom Hayward, who said it's the most important election in the history of the Republic. What is Montgomery trying to tell us? What is the message we need to hear today?
Well, he's telling us right now, Steve, that we are on the verge of being compromised through cyber warfare, of which he is a master of, the most brilliant person in our country on cyber warfare. And they have used this. They moved it from the intelligence, a very highly secure program, and they've moved it from there over to political treachery. And that's what it is. When they moved it out of the CIA, they moved it for their political use, as they have politicized the intelligence community, as we saw in the Russian hoax, and what they've done to General Flynn. All these things are in this force that you and Sydney have been talking about, that want to change America from what it is. It goes back to the Electoral College, to the Supreme Court. All these things are bundled to change America from being a democratic republic to a totalitarian regime. That means a socialist country, which the next step is communism. And that's why there can be no agreement between this Democratic Party and the Republican Party. One choice is freedom, one choice is communism. It's that simple.
You going to be able to stop Hammer and Scorecard?
We intend to stop Hammer and Scorecard.
Next, you're going to hear from Tom Fenton. Tom Fenton of Judicial Watch, who is most famous for exposing millions of voters that had died but remained active on the voting roll in California. He's also made similar discoveries in other states. Also, you'll hear from Sidney Powell. Sidney Powell is most recently famous for being General Flynn's lawyer. This clip is from Fox Business and Lou Dobbs.
Also breaking at this hour, Joe Biden has inexplicably had a major gain in his vote totals since Election Day. In Pennsylvania, for example, President Trump had an almost 700,000 vote lead on election night. This afternoon, the president, he's trailing Biden by 14,000 votes. In Michigan, the president leading by 324,000 votes on election night. Now, Biden is leading by 146,000. A similar story in Georgia, where the president's election night lead of 118,000 is now a deficit of 1,500 votes. And so the story goes. Well, joining us now, Tom Fitton. He's the president of Judicial Watch. Sidney Powell, General Michael Flynn's defense attorney, former federal prosecutor, best-selling author. I want to say, first of all, thank you both for being here, and I appreciate it. Sidney, let's start with this election process. We just heard from John Solomon that the FBI indeed is being diligent, is involved, and we all hope he is exactly right. Your thoughts first about the knowledge now that the Justice Department is involved in this review of the election.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that. I think there are any number of things they need to investigate, including the likelihood that 3% of the vote total was changed in the pre-election voting ballots that were collected digitally by using the Hammer program and a software program called Scorecard. That would have amounted to a massive change in the vote that would have gone across the country and explains a lot of what we're seeing. In addition, they ran an algorithm to calculate votes they might need to come up with for Mr. Biden in specific areas. I think that explains what happened in Michigan, where the computer glitch resulted in a change of votes of about 5,500 in favor of President Trump, just in one of 47 districts. All those districts need to be checked for that same, quote, software glitch, end quote, that would change the result in Michigan dramatically. The same thing is happening in other states. We've had hundreds of thousands of ballots mysteriously appear solely for Mr. Biden, which is statistically impossible as a matter of mathematics. It can all be documented. We are putting it into materials that we will file in federal court, and we need to seek relief in multiple states to enjoin the certification of any election results.
Tom Fitton, as you listen to Sidney, that sounds like a strong case for a straightforward allegation of fraud. The two programs that she just mentioned, I'm going to ask you right now, have you ever heard of them? Because I had not heard of them.
No, I mean, there have been noises about it on the internet, but I don't know anything beyond what Sidney's reporting now. I go back to the numbers you reported at the beginning of the segment. The president was winning on Tuesday. Right. He's not winning now. And he's not winning now as a result of a process that the voters can't have confidence in, the state legislatures can't have confidence in my view, the courts can't have confidence in. So the question is, are the courts going to undo what went on? I don't know. But the state legislatures in Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, perhaps Arizona, they now have an opportunity to make a stand on behalf of the rule of law. Are they going to endorse what went on this week, or are they going to appoint a clean slate of electors that supports President Trump? That could be the next battle, and I would think that activists interested in this issue, and if you're concerned watching this, start talking to your state legislators. And I started asking where Congress is, because Congress in the end is going to be the judge of the electoral college votes. And if I were in Congress, I'd be telling these states, you better keep up on, you better be honest here, because we're not going to accept your votes if your election is a sham.
Well, Sidney, let's go back to Hammer and Scorecard. Are those the names that you just used for those programs? What's being done about it, and how broadly were they used by vote counters in various states?
I think they were very broadly used, but not by the vote counters. They were used by the forces in the Democratic operatives that had access to these programs through the government access points that they have and used it illegally to change votes in this country. It's got to be investigated probably by the president's most trusted military intelligence officials who can get into the system and see what was done. But we do have some evidence that that is exactly what happened. And they've used it against other entities in other countries. It's just been turned recently against our own citizens here to change election results. It's absolutely appalling that that can be done. And whether it's called computer glitches or something else, somebody has actually gone into the system and changed voting results.
That's called intervention in our elections, irrespective of, I guess if they were Russia or China, we'd refer to them as meddling. But it's intervention, and it's also crooked as hell, rigging this election in no matter the jurisdiction, whether it's Michigan, Georgia, wherever it might be. What can we do about it? Because the Department of Justice, I mean, if there's evidence of that program, why not just turn it over to the Justice Department and say, and go to the courts and say, this has got to stop now. Here is the way in which it was done.
Well, we've been trying to get their attention, and we're going to try even harder, and we'll have to put it in a federal lawsuit, apparently, and get as much of it out as we possibly can. We have some excellent witnesses on the issue. But this is coup 5.0, Lou. I mean, there was no reason to think that the Democratic operatives who spent hundreds of millions of dollars creating the Russia hoax, the Steele dossier, taking us through a special counsel operation for 2 years, trying an impeachment hoax, the apocalypse hoax, the obstruction hoax, wouldn't go so far as to create every means of voter fraud they could come up with to steal this election. That's exactly what happens. The president must fight back now in every way, shape, or form. We cannot let this republic be stolen by the Democratic operatives who want to destroy the republic and make it a socialist country where they continue to line their pockets with these backdoor global deals like the Biden laptop from hell exposes.
Well, Sidney, I think you're exactly right about that not happening. Let's turn, Tom Fitton, you've pointed out in our discussions that these legislatures are Republican controlled. Who can take that message to them, and precisely how likely is it that they would be receptive to a clean slate of electors who would represent, say, the state of Pennsylvania? That's a Republican legislature, and stand up for the integrity of elections and support the president.
Well, the focus from the media and activists and regular voters and citizens need to be brought to bear here. Certainly the information we're learning from campaign activists on the ground, independent journalists like John Solomon, the work of Judicial Watch should also be brought to bear. I mean, we knew going into this election in Pennsylvania, Lou, there were 800,000 extra names in the rolls in Pennsylvania. Nevada County has 154,000 inactive names on the rolls. Clark County, Nevada, I mean. So we've got this problem of dirty election rolls, mailing and balloting being allowed to draw from them.
And apparently a Republican Party that doesn't demand that those rolls be cleaned up. I mean, that's crazy. Could you put up that graphic again, please, folks? I want everybody to see what they're looking at, because this is really very important, what Tom's talking about. The control of both chambers of the legislature in these states that are critical right now in deciding who the next president will be: Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia. They must play a role in this to preserve the integrity, just as Tom Fitton is urging. And Sidney Powell, what you're breaking here tonight is extraordinary as well. We've got to go. We're at that point. But thank you both for everything you're doing for the country and for the president. We appreciate it. Thanks so much.
The next clip is from Maria Bartiromo. You will hear once again from Sidney Powell, who explains other aspects.
Yes, there has been a massive and coordinated effort to steal this election from we, the people of the United States of America, to delegitimize and destroy votes for Donald Trump, to manufacture votes for Joe Biden. They have done it in every way imaginable, from having dead people vote in massive numbers to absolutely fraudulently creating ballots that exist only voting for Biden. We've identified at least 450,000 ballots in the key states that miraculously only have a mark for Joe Biden on them and no other candidate. If you look at Florida, where things were done right, you can see that that's how the rest of the country should have gone. But they also used an algorithm to calculate the votes they would need to flip, and they used the computers to flip those votes from Trump to Biden, and from other Republican candidates to their competitors also. I think Doug Collins had the race stolen from him. I think John James had his race stolen from him. It wasn't just President Trump. There were many people affected by this. We have got to fight tooth and nail in federal court to expose this abject fraud and the conspiracy behind it, and get a recount and audits in every place it's needed, which is, frankly, most of the country.
So there are recounts going on right now. We know that in Georgia, you have a list of numbers of ballots with only Joe Biden on the ticket. You say it's 98,000 ballots in Pennsylvania, 80 to 90,000 in Georgia, another 42,000 in Arizona, 69 to 115,000 in Michigan, and 62,000 in Wisconsin. Sydney, if this is true, this appears systemic. Where is the Department of Justice? Where is the AG Bill Barr? If this is so obvious, then why aren't we seeing massive government investigations?
I don't know. We definitely should be. I mean, we're getting reports of all kinds of fraud. We've got getting an affidavit from a postal worker now who talks about having been ordered to backdate ballots. No ballots received after the polls closed on voting day should even be counted. We've got multiple states that didn't even follow the rules of their own legislature. That's a federal constitutional issue. There are at least 3 major federal issues here that will require the Supreme Court to resolve this case. And when the votes are really audited and the real votes are counted, Trump will win. He is the president, and he is in charge of this country.
We talked about the Dominion software. I know that there were voting irregularities. Tell me about that.
That's to put it mildly. The computer glitches could not and should not have happened at all. That is where the fraud took place, where they were flipping votes in the computer system or adding votes that did not exist. We need an audit of all of the computer systems that played any role in this fraud whatsoever. And, you know, Joe Biden had it right. He said that he had the biggest voter fraud organization ever, and he didn't need people's votes now. He would need people later. They had this all planned, Maria. They had the algorithms. They had the paper ballots waiting to be inserted if and when needed. And notably, President Trump's vote in the blue states went up enormously. That's when they had to stop the vote count and go in and replace votes for Biden and take away Trump votes.
I've never seen voting machines stop in the middle of an election, stop down and assess the situation. I also see reports that Nancy Pelosi's longtime chief of staff is a key executive at that company. Richard Blum, Senator Feinstein's husband, significant shareholder of the company. What can you tell us about the interest on the other side of this Dominion software?
Well, obviously, they have invested in it for their own reasons and are using it to commit this fraud to steal votes. I think they've even stolen them from other Democrats in their own party who should be outraged about this also. Bernie Sanders might very well have been the Democratic candidate, but they've stolen against whoever they wanted to steal it from.
Now, what you've heard is by no means all of what's being uncovered, but you have to ask yourself the question that there are some strange things going on that you know and I know just don't add up. And just the actions of the Democrats and their operatives are just plain illegal. Far be it from me to say, but I will, if there's any evidence of tampering, that an election has to be rerun. And if that means extending the term of the current president, then so be it. If you ignore the facts that there are 36 states with these voting machines in them, And if there's any question of their validity, then those elections have to be rerun under a far tighter control. Then, and only then, the elections can be considered valid. Now in closing, there are rumours, but they are only rumours at this time, that there's even more compelling evidence out there to come. That being said, I can only comment on what's out there at the moment. Finally, it's not up to the media, of any sort, to call an election or state or race for any candidate. They can make comments, they can make observations, but no more. To attempt to influence an election by declaring a candidate the winner when the outcomes are being contested is outright interference. I know there's far more to come out there, so stay tuned. It's not over yet. You can find more at aradio.wordpress.com, where you can find links to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Gab, Parler, Spotify, and email. We are continuing to reach out to you, so please pass these links on to your friends. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. You can listen to all our morning moments at Spreaker.com/A-Radio. That's EHRADIO, a radio. And please click on the like button. Join us Monday, Wednesday and Friday, 11:45 Eastern, for our morning moment or tweak. And tell your friends, pass the word. We only tell the truth, not what the Canadian mainstream media want you to know. This time, more than any in history, we all need to trust but verify.